My name is Chris Hyser. I am a Muslim. Most people wouldn't know it by looking at me. I'm kind of like the anomaly when people think of me as a Muslim. I'm a retired police officer. I've served with the military, but not in the military. I ride Harley Davidsons. I'm tattooed, and I'm white. And I'm also a Republican. So I have all these strikes against me. So when people hear about that, it's like, man, you are the anomaly. How did you find Islam? That's the biggest question, and a lot of people are intrigued by the story and how I actually found Islam. It all started back in 2005 when I was deployed to Iraq as a police trainer. So I went to Iraq as a police trainer, and we were able to train up the first initial 135,000 police officers. So we were thrown right into the mix. My first duty station was in Sadr City, which is a Shia community. It's they're followers of Muqtada Sadr, who is a Shia. So we were not welcome there at all. So prior to going there, we had to go to an integration course, cultural integration. They talked about Islam. They talked about the politics of Iraq at the time, which were kind of very unstable. And they said two things you never talk about when you get with the Iraqis. You never talk about politics or religion, because they're very passionate about both. So prior to 2005, I was born into a Christian family in South Central Pennsylvania. So if you know anything about Pennsylvania Dutch, my ancestors trace back to the Quakers, the Pennsylvania Dutch, the Mennonites. I was born and baptized into a Lutheran family. I was raised, if anybody knows about the Lutheran Church, I consider them the sleepers of the religion. They go in there to church, they show up in their Sunday's best, they sit down. As soon as the sermon starts, everybody falls asleep. When the pastor's done, you wake up, you pay your little charity, and you walk out of church, and you go to dinner. So that was pretty much my experience with Christianity. It was very in-depth. I went through communion, had all the Sunday schools and the summer schools of Christianity. And there was always one thing bothering me. It was always the Trinity. I'd never understood why we always referred to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But there's only one God. And when we'd ask the pastor, I remember in Sunday school, one of the students asked, it's like, why are there three gods? And it's like, well, there's not three gods. There's only one God, but there's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And he tried to explain it to where the Father is not God, the Son is not God, the Holy Spirit is not God, but God is all three. So, and then we kept asking, and it kept going on. And finally he said, it's not for us to ask. It's just the way it is. It's like, okay, I try to accept it. So when I got married, and I had two beautiful children back east, they live back east right now, to my first wife, I actually stopped going to church. I started feeling lost in Christianity. I still believed in God. I still prayed to God. There was only one God, and it meant a lot to me. But the actual church was becoming very distant for me, and especially in the early 2000s when the Catholics started having a problem with the priests and everything else. So I really became disillusioned with the church. So when 2005 rolled around, and I got the opportunity to go to Iraq, the Treasury Department hired me on because I'm a retired police officer. So they hired me on to be a police trainer. And like I said, my first duty station was in Camp Shield, which was right in the heart of Sadr City. And my first interpreter was a Shia interpreter, and his name was Qasim. And the first thing he did when he introduced himself is he told me everything about his religion. One thing I'm not supposed to speak about was the religion. So it's like, okay, I don't know how to take this. It's like, okay, that's great. Thank you. And we talked. And every time he got to go home every Thursday night, and he would go home for Thursday night, Friday, and Saturday, and Sunday morning he would come back. And every Sunday he would come back, he'd bring me a little book. And it was with the Shia, they have all these books on every aspect of Islam, whether it's how to do wudu, how to do a prayer, how to perform zakat, how to do your marriage, everything. They have all these little journals, and he kept bringing them to me. And I kept putting them to the side because it's like, okay, I'm happy with Christianity to the degree that I am happy. And Islam, it was so foreign to me because my only exposure at that time was with the Nation of Islam. Growing up in the 60s and 70s, it was a very violent group that, coming from a white Christian family, that it was looked down upon. And then I learned about Malcolm X, how he left the nation, and then he was killed, allegedly killed by the nation. I'm like, wow, okay. This was not something for me, I didn't think. Well, over there, you don't have much time, or not much time. You have a lot of time on your hands, nowhere to go. So I started reading these books, and I started seeing how they connected Christianity and Judaism. It was the same prophets. I didn't know that. I mean, I always thought that Islam was a foreign religion that had nothing to do with, I mean, always heard about Allah, you know, and it's like, is this another God? I always thought it was another God because it was the Arabic term. I didn't understand it. And I started seeing the connection, and it's like, this is just a continuation of Judaism and Christianity. So I started reading the books. And this was early 2005, May-ish, when I started reading the books. And I started learning Arabic from my interpreter. And every time Qasim would talk about Islam, he was so passionate. When he spoke about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he would cry. I mean, he was just so passionate about this. And it's like, you know, what is it with this religion? So I started diving deeper into the books. I started writing Arabic on my own and trying to learn the alphabet and everything on myself, trying to get me a better idea. And then I started reading the Quran, but in the English version. The Yusuf Ali was the one that the military had. Of all versions, that's the one that they passed out to all the Muslims or the ones that wanted to read it. So I started reading the Quran. And I ended my mission in early April of 2006, and I was in Amman, Jordan, and it was on a Friday. And I had become friends with a very good Muslim over there. He's Sunni. He'll tell you that he's a true Jordanian, not a Palestinian. I don't understand the interfighting and everything. And one day he said, would you like to go to the masjid? And I was like, yes, I would like very much. It was on a Friday. It took me about 2 hours prior to the Jummah prayer. The King Abdullah, is King Abdullah the first mosque, the Blue Mosque over in Amman, Jordan. And I took my Shahada. And Sheikh sat down, and he wanted to talk to me for a couple hours before the Jummah prayer. And first off, he told me, he says, I asked him, I says, will my tattoos have a problem? And he says, no. He says, God looks at your heart. He doesn't look, he said, he knows you for what's in your heart, not for your exterior. I'm like, okay, that's good. He says, unless you offend people, don't cover. He says, because, some people will try to tell you, you must cover, it's haram or whatever it is. He says, don't, this is who you are. And he told me, he says, don't change your name. He says, the first thing I see the brothers do, they want to go out there and they want to get an Arabic name. I didn't tell him, but I already had one. My interpreter started calling me Abdul Rahim. And so it's like, he says, yes, you can use the name, but don't change your name. That's what you were born, your parents gave you, keep your name. And he says, I don't want to see you dressed in a tunic or anything else. He says, you're Western, you're born in America, wear Western clothes. He says, why change it? That's not your culture. And he sat down and we talked about the pillars of, the 5 pillars of Islam. He went through and explained them all. And he told me that Islam is like walking onto a beach. The water's extremely cold and there's rocks everywhere. He says, you don't get up there, you strip down to your swimsuit, and you go running in and dive into the water. He says, because you're going to hit a rock, you're going to break your neck, and you're going to say, heck with this, I don't want any parts of Islam. He says, you walk into it like it's cold water. You walk slowly into it. You start getting acclimated. He says, first thing you should learn how to do is wudu. He says, you learn how to wudu. You get that down. He says, you can attend prayer after you wudu. He says, mimic what you see everybody else do. So it's like, okay. He says, don't try to learn Arabic right off the bat, learn the prayers in Arabic. He says, learn them in your native tongue. Don't try to put on a show that you're trying to learn all this other stuff because you're going to hit those roadblocks. And he says, your first Ramadan, when it comes up, try fasting. Don't go in there head first. He says, you will break your neck. And then you'll say, Halas, I'm out of here. I don't want to deal with, this. It's just too much required in there. So I took his advice. We sat down. And after the 2 hours, I walked away with a half-decent understanding of what the basics were for me to become a Muslim. And I did my first Jummah. And I remember we went in there. Ibrahim, that was my friend. He was actually my cab driver. When I first showed up there, he's the one that took me around Amman, Jordan for the first time. And we're still tight. We actually did Hajj last year, and we showed up, and it was me and my wife, so he took me to meet his family. We had dinner, so it was very nice. We've been friends ever since. But he showed me how to do the wudu. It was interesting. It was like, okay, this is different. And then he took me in, and we did the prayer. And I remember the first time I went down, I laid my elbows on the ground, and he's laying there beside me, and he's lifting my elbows up. No, elbows, lifting the elbows up. And I'm trying to do it, and I'm looking over at him. He's, no, that down further below the knees. And he's showing me how to pray. And then after that, we go to a couple prayers. and we would go through, and I would mimic it. And he was writing down stuff in Arabic because he didn't speak too good in English. So he would write down different passages and try to teach me in the cab before we got to the masjid, try to learn something so that I can recite it to myself. So I learned a little bit of Arabic, and but I since lost it. Well, when I come home, I was telling my family. I was kind of reserved about it. I didn't know how they would react. But like I say, the Lutherans are the sleepers of the religion. They're like, oh, okay, great, that's great, whatever. You believe in God, that's great. Nobody nobody got in my face. Nobody hassled me about it. So it's like, wow, this is great. I found more prejudice when I went to the masjid than I did from my Christian brothers when they found out that I was a Muslim, because I come to the masjid, and when I first started going to the masjids back east, I was from the D.C. area. I showed up at a Pakistani mosque, and oh my goodness, it was like I don't know what, I had two heads or whatever. I walk in there and they're like looking at me. I go to pray and I line up in the line, and that guy disappears. And I'm looking there, so I kind of move over, and then a hole opens up, and this guy jumps up in it, and I keep moving over. By the time I knew it, I was in the line all by myself, and I'm like, okay, I gotta go to pray. So it's like, okay, I don't know what I've done. So that was a Pakistani mosque. So it's like, you know what, I'll try another one. So it was Masjid Noor. I went into the Masjid Noor, and it was an Afghan mosque. And it was the one, I can't remember the term, to where they actually go out there in the communities for 40 days. They send you to a remote area to say, okay, we need a brother to go to Florida for 40 days. Who wants to go there? I'm sitting there like, why do I have to go to Florida? I mean, did I do something? What I do? And they're recruiting people. Come on, I need a brother. I need a brother to go there for 40 days. 40, what about 15 days? And I'm just like, what is this, an auction? Are they auctioning us off? Are they trading us? So I was a little bit confused, but they were very welcoming. I mean, after the prayer, I'd always go there for Isha prayer. After the prayer, they always had this huge feast. They throw out the tarp in the middle of the masjid. We'd sit down there, and I'd drink the pink tea and everything. It's like, okay, this is pretty cool. But then I found the Adams Center, which is very well known back east. And the imam was Imam Majid, Sudanese. He took me under his wing. I started going to the New Muslims classes, and it was really starting to learn about Islam. And only until last year did I learn about the 5 pillars, when they actually came into effect. And it wasn't under Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They were revealed as these are objectives of Islam, and that are most requirements in the Quran. But it wasn't until after his death that the 5 pillars actually got established, that these are the 5 pillars. And it's like, I'm still learning. And this was just in one of my classes last year. So I continued to go to the masjid back east, and I was divorced, and I wanted to find a Muslim bride. So I went on Muslima.com, and that's where I met Shella, my wife. We met, I was actually back in Iraq by then. We met in early September 2007. We communicated online back and forth. And then I come home from one of my missions in October, and we actually got to meet in person. I flew out here. I met with her. I talked to Imam Majid about it first. He said, make sure you always have a chaperone. Make sure you have, somebody from the family. So he aligned, his friend out here was Sheikh Sadr Khan, that was here at the masjid here. So he took me under his wing, and we coordinated some things. Had a little bit of problem with the family, the Pakistani family, trying to integrate initially. I met with her younger brother at the time, and first question he was asked, he says, where'd you learn Arabic? I'm like, just by myself with interpreters. Not Rosetta Stone? I'm like, no, why is Rosetta Stone? He says, isn't that where the CIA gets it from? And I'm like, oh, you think I'm CIA? Well, aren't you CIA? Are you trying to infiltrate a Pakistani family to get intelligence on us? I'm like, serious, you think they're going to put a tattooed retired police officer biker into a Pakistani family trying to infiltrate? I would stand out like a sore thumb. So there was a little bit of problem at the beginning, and it took us about 6 months, and because her parents were in India and Pakistan traveling, so we had to wait for her father to get home. And they finally came home in early January, and I flew back out, and it was kind of on the rocks because her brother was not accepting of it. And her father came home, and they met me, and the father asked Shella, he says, do you want to marry him? And she goes, yes, I do. And he said, then you have my blessings. So we on February 15th, I flew back out here again because I was traveling back and forth, and we actually performed our nikah right here in the masjid. I know Sadullah Khan performed it. So that was my initial journey, and then I continued to go back and forth to Pakistan and to Iraq, training police officers, doing dignitary protection over there. And like I said, once I got over to the Middle East, they were so welcoming. They found out I was Muslim. I wore Abdurrahim on my uniform because so that the Muslim children could see who I was. And I'd pull up into a neighborhood and they'd be yelling out of hell, Abdurrahim, Abdurrahim. They'd be yelling, and I had candy for them. And they were always asking me for Toba, which I understood was the soccer ball, or Shakalat. And it's like, Shakalat, Toba. And they'd always want that, so we'd always take them gifts and everything. And they'd invite me to iftar during Ramadan. When I was whatever country I was in, I would dress in their clothing. So in Afghanistan, I dressed in that. I couldn't find a hat to fit my big head, so they had to custom make one because it was a typical hat. So it was funny that they had to go through all this stuff trying to get me to accommodate me so I can go to the masjid and meet the local the imams and sheikhs. So I had a lot of fun over there, very accepting. Went to Umrah 2 years ago with Sohaib Webb. I don't know if you know Sohaib Webb. Me and him we're like brothers. I mean, I call myself a Webby. And, every time he comes out to Orange County, I got to go there to see him and talk, and I'm standing in the back and he sees me. And so he took us to Umrah, and then the following year, just last year, we went to, me and my wife, went back with some friends that we met doing Umrah and did Hajj. It's with Dar es Salaam, a wonderful group. If you ever get to go over there, Dar es Salaam is the group to go with. They're just absolutely wonderful. So we did our Hajj last year. We finished up in Jordan, and spent a couple days with Ibrahim when we were back over there. And so that's pretty much my journey. And then in last September, when I came back from Hajj, I was enrolled with Bayan Claremont out of Claremont, California, for their Masters of Divinity. It's a 72 credit course for my master's, so it's a 3-year course. I've taken a lot of courses. Just this semester alone, I've taken 5 courses, and I've written over 45 papers just this semester. So it's a lot of writing, but I'm getting it down. They tell me it's due next month. I'm writing it this weekend. I'm ahead on everything. And this is my final project with public speaking. Jihad Turk is the president of Bayan, and he is my professor for public speaking. This guy can sell water to a drowning man. When he was talking about this last year at a fundraiser with Sohaib Webb, I actually went online while he's talking and signed up for the course. That's how convincing he was to me. So maybe I'm the gullible one, but he convinced me to take the course. So I'm in my 2nd semester. Inshallah, I get this video submitted to Mr. Turk. He'll give me an A in the course, and I'll be able to move on to my 3rd semester. But in the interim for the summer, I've been accepted as a exchange student at the Qasid University in Amman, Jordan. So I get to go home. It's a couple blocks right down the street from the masjid where I took my shahada, and I will be taking Arabic. So inshallah, I'll be able to come home, and they should get me up to that mid-level of Arabic speaking and understanding. So inshallah, I come back from the summer, and I'll be able to speak fluent. Because I miss that. When the imams get up to speak, they're always quoting either the Quran or the Hadith, and they're always reading it off in Arabic and then translating it in English. I can't do that. I can only do it in English. It just doesn't have the same effect. So inshallah, that's going to be my ultimate goal, is to be able to talk like they do, walk the talk, and walk the walk and talk the talk, as they say up there. So I want to thank you again for allowing me to speak and share my story about how I became a Muslim. Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. Yes, sir.
So when you initially went into the masjid in Amman, Jordan, Shahada, it seems like it was not something that you were pre-planning to do. It just happened on the spur of the moment. Am I correct in that?
It was a spur of the moment on the aspect that when he asked me, I had talked to him about it before that, but it was early on when I first arrived. It was first part of April, and it was midweek. And he had said, it's better if you do the Shahada, let's do it before I do my prayer. And one Friday rolled around, and a couple of our friends, we were going to Petra.
That was the first time into the masjid?
No, it was not the first time. I had not prayed in the masjid. He had taken me into the masjid and showed me around. Not that one. There was one on the way to Petra, because he took me down there to where we stopped, and he showed me inside. But then that was the actual first time I prayed in the masjid, was the day I did my shahada. So prior to that, I'd been in there. He'd showed me it, and I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm ready yet. Let's. I guess I was having cold feet. I had been wanting to. I had wanted to do it in Iraq, but all of our masjids that we had on the military bases were militarily run. So they were run by the Iraqi military, and they were all Shia, and they were very strict. My interpreters was like, we don't like to go there and pray because just the way that they act, and it's a Shia mosque. They said it'd be better if you did it outside of Iraq, to where you can actually go out into the community and integrate with them. So it had been in my heart. I wanted to. I was just waiting for the right moment. And then April 21st, 2006 rolled around. It was a Friday. I'm like, okay, let's do it. So he wrote down the Shahada in Arabic. He's trying to teach me on the way over there. He says, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And I'm trying to say it. And I was like, I can't get it. I was so nervous. And I got there, and the sheikh's like, no Arabic. Say it in English. It's like, and then when they had 4 witnesses. This is very, very unique. They had 4 witnesses. One of the witnesses was standing there. He took it. This year I went back. I visited the mosque on a Friday. I'm walking out, and a guy walks up to me, and he says, starts talking to me. He says, I remember you. I'm like, well, I haven't been here in 11 years. He goes, I was one of your witnesses when you did your shahada. I'm like, oh, subhanAllah. I mean, what are the chances I show up on a Friday and one of my witnesses was actually there? My sheikh, unfortunately, had passed away a year before, but his son was taking over. He had taken over the mosque. So I went there to visit my sheikh, and he had passed away the year before, unbeknownst to me.
Was it common to see a lot of military personnel?
There was. There's actually been some studies on it, and actually about 6% of the United States military that was deployed actually converted to Islam. So 6% is a pretty good number. Yes, ma'am.
What do your children say about this?
Very accepting. My oldest daughter is a special needs, so she really doesn't understand. When I come home and I told her I'm Muslim, after I married Shella, and we come home one time, we go to prayer, she goes, well, okay, I guess I'm Muslim too. But her mother's like, no, you're Christian. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to argue, I'm not going to push it. But my youngest daughter back east, she's got 2 grandkids. I mean, they know we're Muslim. They see us pray and everything. Never asked anything, or said anything bad about it. Her son, her husband served in the military in Iraq, so I mean they're very familiar with the Islamic cultures and what goes on. I mean, he was with the 82nd Airborne, so.
I'm just curious, maybe they might be intrigued or interested in.
I talk about it a little bit and see if they're receptive. With my younger daughter, she's a daddy's girl, so she listens to me, and she's not really in tune with the church, so. I don't know if it would ever happen. I would hope it would, but if it does, it's great. If it doesn't, well, God, she believes in God.
That's true.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you again.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.